This is the Comics Alternative Webcomics, reviews of The Zombie Hunters, Kim Reaper, and Nothing is Forgotten. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Comics Alternative Webcomics. I'm Derek.
And I'm Sean, and you're listening to two guys with advanced degrees talking about webcomics.
And this month, Sean and I are going to be talking about three horror-related titles. It is the month of Halloween, after all. And, we've done this for the past, 2 or 3 years, in fact.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, and all three of these, I think, would qualify in one form or another as horror-related. They're quite different, but they're all horror-related titles. Mm-hmm. We're going to begin with The Zombie Hunters by Jenny Romanchuk, or maybe it's Adams. We're not entirely sure about that. After that, we're going to look at Kim Reaper by Sara Graley, and then we're going to wrap up with a completed, relatively short webcomic by Ryan Andrews, Nothing is Forgotten. But before we get into that discussion, we want to let all of you know that this episode of the Comics Alternative Webcomics is brought to you by those great folks at Discount Comic Book Service. Go to their website, dcbservice.com, for all of your comics pre-ordering needs. There, you're going to find all DC, Marvel, Image, and Dark Horse titles at 40% off at the cover price if you pre-order. For all of the other publishers, you'll find that those discounts can be anywhere from 20 to 35% off the cover price. And every single month, you're going to find some unbelievable specials. Sometimes those specials could be as much as 45% off the cover price. Sometimes 50% off at the cover. But occasionally, you can find discounts that are even more impressive than that.
And we'd be remiss if we didn't also mention their sister company, mydigitalcomics.com. We have to assume that since you're listening to a podcast about webcomics, you probably are interested in digital comics as well.
That's right. And if you have judged for the Eisner Awards in the past, you don't know the difference between a digital comic and a webcomic. Sorry for that dig.
No. That's worthwhile. We've mentioned that on the podcast before, but mydigitalcomics.com has a lot of your favorite comics in a digital comics format. Folks like Boom Studios and Black Dog Productions, Dynamite, Image. A lot of great publishers there as well, and you can get your digital comics in PDF and CBZ formats, which are, I should point out, DRM free. Always critical against maybe some other companies that may have a digital comics format you may have heard of, but we won't mention their name because they didn't sponsor us. But mydigitalcomics.com, DRM free comics of a lot of great publishers. Worth checking them out as well.
That's right. Now, whether you like your comics in print or digital form, you can't go wrong with the good people at Discount Comic Book Service. Go to dcbservice.com or mydigitalcomics.com. They will take care of all of your comics needs. And after you do visit those sites, please send them an email and tell them that Sean and Derek sent you. So, Sean, everything going okay?
Yeah. Keeping busy. As a matter of fact, that's the busyness is one of the things that I wanted to bring up here just in a little bit, because we, as you recall, a while back, were talking with Jim McLean and Paul Schultz. We brought them on the show for several months, as they were starting up a new webcomic called Poe and the Mysteriadson. And the reason why I bring them up in relation to being busy is because I was hoping to have them on the show this month. Weird scheduling problems. We weren't able to do that, unfortunately. But the relevant piece to being this month particular is that they have a Kickstarter going on right now for Poe and the Mysteriadson. It was an interesting discussion or series of discussions we had as we watched and listened to them as they were getting started with their comic. We saw a lot of stuff getting pulled together before it even launched. I think we were maybe 6 months, 7 months or something like that before they even launched.
Like that. Mm-hmm.
Before they even launched the comic. They've been doing well. It obviously has since launched, and they've been continuing to update that and whatever. And now they've got it to a point, they've got enough material together. They're putting out a print book and Kickstartering that. I believe that Kickstarter is going through the end of the month, so you have still a few weeks left to check things out. But I just
October.
The end of October here.
A few days, several days, not weeks. Yeah.
Yeah, it is later in the month than I thought it was. See, that's what I'm talking about. It's being very busy lately here. But yeah, I want to make sure that they got a good shout out here, even though we weren't able to get them on the show again in time for this. But yeah, go check them out. It was a really great series of talks that we had with them earlier. It was a really interesting comic, I thought. Very good writing, very good art, and worth checking out their Kickstarter as well, supporting them there. So go over to Kickstarter, look up Poe and the Mysteriads, and donate and contribute to that project as much as you can. It's worthwhile and worth checking out.
Okay, Sean, you want to start the show by talking about the first title that we're going to be looking at for this month, and that is Jenny Adams, or Romanchuk's The Zombie Hunters.
Yeah, this is something you can find at thezombiehunter's.com.
Mm-hmm. And we should mention that one of the reasons why we're unsure about the name, she's been listed as, the author has been listed as Jenny Romanchuk. However, she's also been listed as Jenny Adams, and in the latest installment, which appeared in March of this year, she posted something where she signed it Jenny Adams. So we apologize, Jenny, if you're listening to this, if we're unsure what your last name is, but we've seen it both ways, and we don't know what's definitive.
Yeah, but still the same, as far as we can tell, at least it's the same person. So, but what we have here is
let's say first that this is a webcomic that started in November of 2006. So it's quite old, and it's still going on, again, with the last installment in March. So this is, it says on the site it's updated every Monday and Thursday. But apparently there are hiatuses because life happens, right? Which is understandable. But the story is still going on. And so what you were going to say, Sean?
Well, I was just going to kind of state the obvious here is the basic premise of the story is that the Zombie Hunters is about a group of people who hunt zombies. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. And I think you can't do better than in terms of establishing, I guess, the premise by going to the About page. And on the About page, you'll find a description that says, The Zombie Hunters is a new look at an old theme. It is inspired by a post-apocalyptic vision of the future as well as past human history. This story follows a group of zombie hunters as they go through life as survivors of an undead outbreak. The characters reside on an artificial island, the former site of the Argus Research Campus. The hunters, like so many others on the island, are infected. They carry a dormant strain of the undead virus, which will cause them to turn into one of several different types of undead when they die, which I thought that was an interesting twist on the theme. The infected are marked and segregated from the rest of the inhabitants on the island, making a living by working offshore in the wastes, hunting zombies, and collecting salvage, trading their freedom for safety. As the story unfolds, you'll find out more about the characters and their sordid pasts and discover hidden secrets about them, their world, and the people that surround them. So I think that's a pretty good description of the premise. It doesn't tell you everything, of course, but there you go.
Well, and that's the interesting thing here is there's a lot of the premise is wrapped up right in the name. Right. I mean, the concept is fairly simple and straightforward. Right. You got the zombie outbreak. You got people trying to survive. And there's a group of them in particular are actually actively going out and trying to get rid of the zombies. Right. That's pretty much your basic man against nature or man against man, depending on how you define those. But what's interesting is then what makes it a good zombie story, I think, or to me makes it at least more interesting, is when you start getting into the characters themselves. If you spend all your time just, having people throwing lawnmowers and chainsaws and whatever at the zombies and just making a giant bloodbath and lots of gore, I find that pretty boring. Mm-hmm. But if you do something where you're looking at the individual characters and not just that they're trying to survive, but how they're trying to survive, why they're trying to survive, how they interact with each other, I think that's what makes things interesting. That's where the Walking Dead interests come from, right? It's not so much the interest in zombies, it's the people interacting with one another. I think this has kind of a same idea behind that, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. I really like the twists that Adams, I guess we can call her Adams because we need to be consistent here, spun both the post-apocalyptic narrative trope as well as the zombie trope. Because she did give them twists. And, one of the things I read in the About that I wanted to highlight is the fact that when someone does become a zombie, they can become one of any several type. I think one of 8 different types that are listed. So you can be a hunter zombie, you can be a crawler zombie, you can be a berserker zombie, just different types. So I really liked the change that she gave to that. Another thing that I really appreciated about what Adams did in giving a different turn to the zombie narrative is the fact that when you're infected, you don't become a zombie. You don't become the undead automatically. You become undead if you're infected once you die a natural death. So, for instance, if you're infected and you go on living and nothing ends your life, you're okay, right? You won't turn into the undead, what we would call a zombie. But if something happens, like you get hit by a vehicle or kind of like you did, Sean,
right?
Although you survived, thank God. Or, someone stabbed you, then you would become a zombie. And I appreciated that.
Yeah, that was honestly, I'm not generally a big fan of the zombie genre because to me, a lot of it never made a lot of sense. Mm-hmm. Why do some people become zombies? Why do some just die? At what point do you stop being a zombie and become a skeleton? And then does that have any impact on why you're moving or not? Or, there's a lot of stuff that just never made sense to me, just at the conceptual level. But what Jenny's done here is she's put enough logic behind it that this kind of it clicks for me in that sense, as like she's gone through and figured out, okay, well, why would you become a zombie and what would cause that? And why would some people be zombies and some not? And there are these different types of zombies, like you said. And there's a lot of logic that she puts into the story and thought that she puts into the zombie idea that I don't think I've seen. Again, I'm not a particularly big zombie fan, so I haven't read everything, but she's put a lot more thought into this than a lot of people have, I think, and I really appreciate that. I thought I think there was a page or two there where she was going through some of the explanations, kind of slowed down the pace of the story a little bit, but I still appreciated that they were there as an explanation. And it made the whole premise made a lot more sense for me.
Mm-hmm. Oh, by the way, update. I did find her Twitter page, and her last entry was in October, and the name is listed as Jenny Romanchuk.
Okay.
So I'm wondering if Jenny Adams, who signed that note in the last entry back in March, is someone else completely.
It's entirely possible.
Okay. Wow. Okay. So if someone
Jenny,
knows, tell us. Yeah.
Yeah. Jenny, if you're listening, let us know what's going on. So back to the story though. What is, I think, one of the interesting things about this is not so much that we have a zombie outbreak and that you've got this group of people, with shooting shotgun shells to zombie faces and whatnot. The interesting thing in any real zombie picture or story or what have you is the interaction of the human characters.
Right.
And I think that is what this story is about, is this particular group. There are several groups of zombie hunters out there, but we're focusing in on one particular group of just a handful, six people, and how they interact and how they came to be collected in this group of not quite misfits, but they certainly don't fit the mold of a typical, what would be typical in this world, zombie hunter group.
Right.
They're not very militant. They're not. They're a little bit more on the outcast side of the. I don't know that it's a. I guess it's a government organization. This Argus Research Campus.
Right.
Although I don't know if that's made explicit at any point. But in any event, it's definitely highly organized, highly trained professionals here, and then this group of zombie hunters that's maybe not quite so highly trained and not quite so professional in how they handle things.
Now, the Argus Research Campus, or ARC, as they're known, they have a military wing. They also have a medical wing, and we get that information. I think it's the beginning of chapter 4, if I'm not mistaken. This is after. And we can talk about this in a moment. The first 3 chapters deal with the first 2 chapters deal with, I think, the initial dilemma of this group, our main group of zombie hunters, and what they're going through at the moment. And this is where we get a lot of that personality interaction that you were just describing, Sean.
Mm-hmm.
But then I think it's the beginning of chapter 4, we get in the form of, I think, a really well done movie, what happened and the divisions within this society. So Argus Research Campus is based on this artificial island that had once been a research campus, no longer is. There is a group of individuals who have something has happened to cause the undead, right? And as I mentioned, you can have a virus of some sort, but it won't take effect in terms of being turned undead until you die a natural death, and then you become a zombie. Mm-hmm. So there's a group of people who have this, and they are, as I think you mentioned earlier, they're not only segregated, but they're marked, right? So they have, I believe, armbands. And they're designated as individuals who were infected. Then there's a group of individuals who were not infected, as best that they know. And so they're marked as such. And so if they're unmarked or if they're uninfected, they're marked as green for all practical purposes. If they are infected, they're marked as R. And for reasons in terms of societal preservation, if you're infected, you have to let the authorities know if you leave the premises, or anyone. If you see someone who appears to be infected for any reason, you're required to tell the authorities about it so that they can take the appropriate measures. And it sounds, at least on its surface, rather authoritarian, but it does make logical sense. Mm-hmm. Now, as I described in the about description, those who are infected they can work within the society, so they can work on the island where ARC is. At the same time, they can work off island in order to do their own thing, in order to make money, in order to make a living. And they can do this by either hunting zombies or looting or exploring territory. And many of them do. The thing is, that's dangerous, as we see in the opening chapters of the book. And we get all of this information in quite a number of pages at the beginning of chapter 4 in the form of this really interesting movie. And we find out later, we kind of expected it, that the movie is being watched by kids in a classroom. Yeah,
it's your kind of typical PSA type of thing that you would get stuck in 7th period. Because the teacher wanted a break or something. Yeah, that's one of the interesting things that Jenny does narratively here too, is she has a lot of interesting things going on, I think. One of them is that she starts right in the middle of the action. The story opens up basically with this group of characters in the middle of this zombie outbreak, right? And they're just literally trying to survive. They're out of ammunition. They're getting split up. There's one of their people is able to get back to and get a helicopter to try and find them, but then they need to find a drop point where they can safely board the helicopter, et cetera, et cetera. And that's the first couple of chapters, is basically they're just surviving and kind of going along, trying to do the best they can. But then once they get back and they start getting reprimanded for having screwed up in a variety of fashions,
finding themselves in a red zone.
Yeah.
Marked by unsafe zombies and all of that.
Right. And then the rest of the story is essentially goes back to I think it goes like 10 or 11 months earlier or something like that, and shows you how they got themselves into that predicament in the first place. And there's this very long, it's like 20 chapters worth at this point, backstory of how they found out themselves into that situation and who these characters are and why they're doing things they're doing. And so there's a lot of interesting narrative devices that Jenny uses in that process, right? It's not just here, we're going to start this story and people are going through and do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. She started in the middle and it's kind of bouncing around a little bit. But the story holds together very well, and it makes for some interesting reveals later on when, for example, and we can talk about this a little bit more, there's the character of Charlie. Early in the story, he is dropped in the middle and is surrounded by zombies, but the zombies seem to ignore him. And we find out later why he is the way he is and why zombies treat him the way they do. And that's a part of this backstory that we get into, which, and like I said, it's all makes for some very interesting narrative devices. And there's no point, and she does a good job of not saying, I don't know, something to the effect of, okay, remember back in chapter 1 when we did this, that this is the reason why that happened, right? It's just stuff that you pick up on. It's like, oh, if because of XYZ, that makes the introduction stuff that we saw several chapters ago, that all puts that in context. This all makes sense now. So it's one of those stories where she's able to give you a bunch of individual puzzle pieces and you don't get a sense of the full picture until later on, but she doesn't put it together for you in a very ham-fisted manner. It's pretty well done, I think, in terms of the narration on that and that story structure. It all makes sense. If you're reading along, you get to this point, and Charlie is the most obvious example, but there are several other pieces as well, where you just say, oh, okay, that's why this character acts like this, or that's why this character is being treated the way they are, or that's why this group of characters is acting the way they are, and this is where this character came from, and all of that. So I think this is very good storytelling overall because of that kind of thing,
right?
That type of approach.
The closest thing she comes to exposition dump is what I had just mentioned at the very beginning of chapter 4, but I think that was necessary in order to establish, let's say, a societal premise of the various divisions and why those divisions are there. She doesn't deal with character. And as you pointed out, what's most important about this story is character.
Right. And there was one other point too, where I felt there was a little exposition heavy. But she treated that very differently too. So we've got this PSA thing, which is, that's been used before, right? As a concept that's not entirely original, but she also has some, there was another point early on too, where she explains a little bit of a difference there. But she doesn't treat it the same way. It feels a little exposition heavy, like I said, but she's at least doing something different with it. So it's not, here's one character and they're just spitting out everything that the reader should know type of situation. Excuse me. It just flows as part of the narrative, but she's able to exercise enough artistic challenge to treat every instance of that kind of thing differently. So it's not, so you don't get a sense as a reader that, okay, here we're in for this exposition dump because she's doing this sequence again, and that's really tiresome, really quickly, in any story, but she doesn't do that here. So I think that's a good job on her for, again, her narrative abilities in that sense.
Yeah, exactly. Another thing I very much appreciated about the Zombie Hunters is the layout of the site. And we have, it's fairly easy to navigate around. If you're looking for an archive, an archive is embedded at the bottom, I guess, of each entry in the form of a scroll.
Yeah.
So you won't see anything about an archive at the top in the menu, but at the main menu, you have an about page, you have a cast page, you have an encyclopedia. And one of the things that the encyclopedia does, it tells you the various jobs that the zombie hunters take on. There's also a gallery of Jenny's art, a forum, a store, and I think she has 2 volumes of the Zombie Hunters in print, if I'm not mistaken, because I saw both of those on Goodreads. Links, extras, translations. Apparently, someone has translated this into Spanish, and she's invited other people to translate this into other languages as well. So I think it's a pretty good site in terms of its layout.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The one thing that I might criticize in terms of the site itself, and I,
yeah, I know. How are we going to say this?
How do we say this? Yeah.
This is not Romanchuk's fault.
Well, yeah. See,
unless her decision not to take it off the server is.
Yeah. So the challenge that you and I were discussing beforehand, as we were trying to read through this, and it takes a while, right? It's 700 plus pages at this point. We both ran into instances where we would try to go to one of the pages, either a story page or one of these, one of the about page or cast page or what have you. And it just would not load. Mm-hmm. We'd end up with an error message of some kind that spit back. As near as I can tell, that is an issue with the server that she's keeping this site on. Mm-hmm. That server is getting enough traffic, not necessarily to her site itself, but whatever other sites share that server with her. But that server is getting enough traffic that it is unable to handle the workload. Mm-hmm. And so if you happen to be trying to read this at a time when there's a lot of other people hitting that server, it ends up timing out and you get error messages. And we were running into that earlier this morning before we started recording here. I know I ran into it periodically while I was trying to read through. I would go, going from page 200 to page 201, it would suddenly time out. But when I came back an hour later or something, it was fine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now, as we record this, I've been awake for maybe a little more than 6 hours. Only once over the past 6 hours have I been able to bring up the homepage. In fact, right now I'm trying it as we speak, and it still doesn't come up. And so it's a serious server problem. Now, earlier when I was reading this in, long chunks of time, I had no problem whatsoever. So I wasn't sure exactly what was going on other than just server issues and server overload. Because again, so we highly recommend that our listeners read the zombiehunters.com, go to the zombiehunters.com and read the Zombie Hunters. The potential problem you may encounter is you may not be able to bring it up to read anything. And then while you're reading it, as Sean points out, you may read some things and then all of a sudden things freeze up.
Yeah. And I wonder too if Jenny is even aware of this problem. Because one of the things I noticed I actually applaud her for this. There's, the site has been running since since 2006. And you would think, well, hey, that's over a decade. That's going to be huge and take forever to read through. But she's actually put the story on hiatus more than a couple of times. To her credit, though, she will come back with in most cases, a comic drawn explanation of what's been going on and why she hasn't been updating and that kind of thing. And they basically amount to self-care, and that she had she was very open and upfront about some mental health issues that she was running into and how she was trying to deal with those, both from a psychological and a medical perspective. And, that's totally understandable. I can't fault her for that. Obviously you got to take care of yourself before you try and do something like a webcomic. You need to make sure that you're in the right headspace for that. And she fully admits that a good chunk of the time she spent working on her website on Zombie Hunters, she was not in the good headspace for that. And she was pushing herself into avenues that were not particularly healthy. Hence, she's got a couple of these fairly extended hiatuses. And what I've seen here too is while she's come back to it and worked on the project in 2018, she hasn't done a lot in the past several months. So I think she's probably experiencing some other issues like that and may not be able to keep as close an eye on her webcomic as she may have otherwise liked. And I think that could very well be why we're seeing some of these server problems not getting resolved necessarily, is that
she's not aware of it.
She's not aware of it because she's doing her whatever self-care she needs to take care of.
Or doing other things. I mean, again, the cartoonists have a life outside of the webcomic that they're creating.
That is very true. So, it's unfortunate, but understandable.
Right.
I guess
if you can read it, it's well worth the read.
Absolutely.
Well, Sean, let's move on to the second webcomic that we're discussing for the month of October, the month of Halloween. And this is a completely different spin on the horror genre. And this is Kim Reaper, and it's by Sara Graley, and I believe she's over in the UK. And you can find this at kimreapercomic.com. And this is a really new webcomic. In fact, the very first installment went up on June 4th of this year, and it's still going, although I think Graley is taking a break right now. There's a lot of comic packed into the limited time that this has been in existence, because apparently Graley publishes every weekday. And so we get a page of material, and I think there are 4 completed chapters or issues, let's say. They function as chapters, but this does appear kind of like a comic book in many ways. And in fact, I think the first 2 issues of the comic is out in print or about to. I think the second one about to be come out. Oh, it says Kim Reaper, Vampire Island #2 hits comic shops October 3rd. So I guess it just recently came out. So Graley plans on, I guess, putting out each of these issues or chapters in print form, making those available. And I really appreciate that. The fact that this hasn't been around that long, but there's quite a bit of story material, I think, to deal with here.
Yeah, actually. And you know what? I haven't been able to figure this out exactly. I think Vampire Island is actually a totally different story than what we're seeing and what's on the site currently. Because
that's right. Because in chapter 2, I don't remember there being vampires.
Well, not only do we not have vampires, but there's also a trade paperback of Kim Reaper out called Grim Beginnings.
Okay, so this is okay. So
that's actually out from Oni Press, I believe. So I think, as near as I could tell, is she's got some agreement, and we've seen this before in some of the other webcomics we've talked about. She's got this agreement where she's putting out her webcomic, but a major publisher is also doing a print edition of it shortly thereafter. And
the webcomic stays up.
And the webcomic stays up, yeah.
And I applaud her for that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's anybody who can set that as part of their contract, I think is doing what they need to be doing. We've seen other webcomics where they put up the webcomic, and then once it gets published, then they have to take it all down or take down everything but the first chapter or something like that. I think that's the wrong approach. I think that's kind of an old school mindset, and I don't think that necessarily makes sense. But as near as I could tell, the agreement that she's got, whatever it is with, like I said, I think it's Oni Press. They're letting her keep this up while the book is out in production as well.
Yeah. And, I said at the outset that this is a completely different spin on the horror genre because this is a comedy in I think primarily a comedy. In fact, I would say this may be even more of a comedy than a horror story, but I would put this within the horror category, which is why we're including it on our October Halloween show.
And we should probably explain why.
Yeah. And so basically what we have going on here is our main character, Kim, is a Reaper, and she takes a job as a Reaper part-time in order to pay for her apartment so she can live. So she goes to school with another character named Rebecca. She goes by the name of Becca. And in chapter 1, we see that Becca is completely crazy over Kim. And Kim, we should mention, has a goth look to her, appropriately enough.
Sure.
And that really turns Rebecca on. So Becca is like head over heels. In fact, there are 2 or 3 pages where she's talking in, I guess, a library with her friend Tyler about how, she just wants to meet Kim and talk to her and get to know her. And so at one point after this, Kim gets up and leaves, and Rebecca wants to go follow her and invite her out for a drink. So she has a plan, right? I have a plan how to get to know Kim. And so as Kim goes outside, all of a sudden this portal opens, and Becca has no clue what's going on. And so she decides that she doesn't decide she's going to follow, because she takes out her mobile phone to take a picture of that portal because no one would believe it. And her phone is sucked inside of the portal. And so going after the phone, Becca is inside of the portal, and she finds herself on the other side of the portal in someone else's house. And Kim is standing over what appears to be either a sleeping or a dead cat holding a scythe. And Becca doesn't know what the hell's going on. And so this is basically how Becca finds out that Kim is a Reaper who has taken the job part-time in order to pay for her apartment and other things, I would guess. And so after that, it's a series of adventures that they go on. And I mean, not adventures in the form of, Huck and Tom going down the river, or Huck and Jim going down the river, I guess, or going on to Jackson Island or anything like that. But they just find themselves in various dilemmas. So for instance, in the first couple of chapters, Kim wants to show Becca what it's like being a Reaper and how she has a lot of power with that scythe. And the scythe can basically allow her to go anywhere, and that's one of the reasons why she loves it. And of course, she also points out to Becca that Kim doesn't take lives. Because the people are already dead, she's just transporting the souls. She also mentions to Becca that since she's just starting off as a part-time Reaper, she has only been assigned to take the souls of animals. She can't do humans yet. And in fact, the fact that she can't do humans becomes the premise for another adventure or dilemma that they find themselves in later on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's an interesting, I think it's a really cute, interesting take on the kind of Grim Reaper concept. Mm-hmm. And that's been something that's been toyed with before in various capacities. Everything from Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey to Kim and Mandy, and some other stories like that. But this one, I don't know that I've seen quite this take on it either. That it's not really, honestly, it's not even that much about the reaping part of it. I mean, there is I don't know what you would call them, like a collection of Reaper overlords or whatever.
Right, who are down in hell.
Yeah, who are down in hell, kind of managing all of the individual Reapers going out and doing their business. But the storyline is more about Kim and Becca just kind of getting to know each other and falling in love. It's almost more of a love story than a horror story in some ways.
With a lot of comedy tossed in.
Yeah, with a lot of comedic bits in there.
So here we have a horror rom-com.
Yeah, basically, that's what this is. That's basically what this is. But I thought it was a lot of fun. I thought it was... she's got a lot of interesting, fun takes on what to do and what to bend the rules in terms of what Reapers can and can't do and how they operate. And I thought that there's some fun, clever bits going on here and very entertaining, particularly showing Becca reacting to this for the first time and seeing, Becca trying to go down into hell to save Kim from essentially a work reprimand kind of thing, and ends up theoretically killing the head Grim Reaper.
Or apparently,
yes.
Knocking him on the head.
Knock him on the head with a rolling pin, of all things. It's fun. There's a lot of, like I said, a lot of interesting things going on. A lot of interesting takes on the death concept and the Grim Reaper concept many of which I don't think I've seen before.
Right. And one of the things I enjoyed about this is we have their first, again, I don't know whether to call it adventure or dilemma, in the first 2 chapters of Kim Reaper. And then in the third, Kim finds herself in a completely other dilemma. She has to report to the head Reaper to account for the fact that she has, in fact, taken a human soul because she thought, I can do it. I'll show them that I can do it and not just do animals. And as a result of the reprimand, she's given a new task. And that task just happens to be reaping the soul of Becca.
Yes.
And then what happens with that, I think, is really good. And I think, I think this second storyline, if we want to call it the second storyline, is even better than the first.
Yeah, well, you get the first runs into, I don't know if it's an issue per se, but there's a lot of just basic setup and exposition.
Yeah, setting up the concept.
Just basically getting a baseline of here's who these characters are, here's what they're doing, here's how all this operates. And so we get a lot of time spent in that first house where Kim is trying to take the soul of this dead cat. And there's a fair amount of time spent in that house with the two of them sitting behind the couch. for a reason I won't go into. But so I think, once we get some of that stuff out of the way, essentially, we're able to carry the story forward and get some more interesting things going on. I think as we go to, there's the pirate ship scenes and the scenes down at hell.
Haunted pirate ship. Don't forget.
Haunted pirate ship. Yes. With the ghouls. There's some of that stuff makes for some very interesting story ideas. And I think a lot more entertaining stuff going on.
Right. And the thing I appreciated about this second storyline, which we can see primarily in chapters 3 and 4, is the dynamics and complexities of this relationship between Becca and Kim, especially as it applies to Becca. Because whereas once Becca was all a guy, I don't even know what I mean. She was gaga. I was mixing my terms here. But no, she was crazy for Kim. Now she's not so sure, because as she tells her friend Tyler at one point, I think it's in chapter 3, said, I used to be really crazy for Kim, but now I see that she has some big issues and I don't want her problems to become my problems. In other words, she's a part-time Grim Reaper. And so, she doesn't know why she does it. Paying rent isn't enough. As she tells Kim, you can take another job, which actually she does temporarily. She works with Becca in her bakery store, or in a bakery store that she works at. So, and I just like the way that those relationships kind of engage and change and morph over time, because at first Kim was a little put off by Becca, wondering, why the hell are you following me? But now she has apparently become attached to Becca. Whereas we had Becca, who was once crazy about Kim, in the second storyline, not so sure, ends up coming around and helping to save her at the end. And so where we are at the very end of chapter 4, and I think the last page of that went up on October 10th of this year, is we see them holding hands and walking off into kind of a heart-shaped vortex. And it says to be continued. So we know there's going to be a chapter 5. Or we can assume there's going to be a chapter 5.
Yeah, I'm fairly certain that Graley here has plenty more story ideas. I don't doubt that for a minute.
Yeah. And it's interesting. I'm wondering, now you mentioned the Oni book. I'm wondering if in the UK she has in any way put out these individual chapters as issues like a comic, because for all practical purposes, each of these chapters is about the same length as a comic book.
Yeah, that's, I don't know if she has or not. I would not be surprised, but I do not know that.
Now, another striking thing about Kim Reaper is the art. Now, how would you describe Graley's art style?
Well, it's definitely very cartoony. I mean, you got the big round kind of ping pong ball style.
We don't mean
eyes.
Cartoony in a bad way.
Yeah, no, not degrading her art at all. It's really looks like something you'd see on a Saturday morning cartoon, like a Steven Universe kind of thing, almost in some places. So there's, very cartoony, very, it's not simplified cartoony.
No, I think it's highly detailed.
Yeah, there's a surprising amount of detail that gets put into it, despite being very obviously exaggerated cartoon features and whatnot. How else? I guess I would also go so far to say cute. Not a term I use a lot, but yeah, I would say that the characters
have a cute
all
look.
pretty cute.
Yeah,
including even the skeletons and the ghouls,
and even to some degree the zombies. And I was going to say that you were talking about the detail in terms of this cartoony art. We get a lot of detail with the zombies in, I believe it's chapter 4.
Yeah. And because who doesn't love a good zombie outbreak?
That's right. Also, the colors. It's very vibrant, and I was struck by the colors.
Yeah. Good call on that.
Another thing that I appreciated about Kim Reaper, and I'm looking at it now on a desktop computer where I have a wider screen. And so you have the individual pages set against a backdrop of these ghosts as they're kind of sailing across the sky, which is nice. Now, I originally read this on my iPad, and I had no way of knowing that there was a backdrop.
Oh, really?
Really. And in fact, the comic itself, each installment, each page consumed the entire page of my tablet. And I liked that for this reason. And we've talked about this before over the past, several years. There are some webcomics, they may be great stories, great characters, all of that. However, the art at times can be, especially in terms of the fonts of what people are saying, can be so small that you have to enlarge them to my older eyes in order to read what's going on. I had no problem whatsoever seeing what was happening and what people were saying in Kim Reaper, because basically what I had on my tablet is primarily a page of Kim Reaper.
Yeah, no, it's definitely very big art size on that. I actually, on the monitor, I was using a desktop at the time to read this originally, and I actually had to scale back and zoom out a little bit to try and get everything on the page, because my desktop obviously has got more of a horizontal format. But even so, reducing the size down to whatever 75% or whatever I ended up at, it was still very legible. I had no problem going through and reading anything on there.
Yeah. Okay. Now I see. I'm scrolling down on one of the pages, and I see the Oni book that you're referring to.
Oh, okay.
I didn't see that originally. I didn't notice that on my tablet.
Interesting. Okay.
Maybe I just didn't scroll down far enough.
Yeah, I was going to say, was it not showing up at all, or?
I can't recall.
Okay.
Again, when I had the entire page there on my iPad screen, I didn't feel that I had to really scroll down to see much of anything. I guess I should have scrolled down. I think maybe at one point I did scroll down to see if there was information like an about page or anything like that. Now, Graley doesn't separate those bits of information like an archive or about on separate pages. But if you do scroll down, you get to meet the cast of who the individuals are, and you get to know a little bit about Kim, and you get to know at least how to contact Sara Graley.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's definitely a little bit more information down there, and obviously then links to Oni and her personal website and that kind of thing.
Yeah. So this is in many ways kind of a differently designed website or webcomic than we're used to seeing.
Yeah, I think she's pretty clear on this that this is going to print from day one. I'm fairly certain she knew that before she even started drawing any of this and before she built this website. So it definitely has, in that sense, it doesn't have a lot of the kind of navigational trappings that you would typically see in a webcomic. But I think that's speaks to more that print intention. She's doing this in small installments. She's doing this essentially as a way to promote the book, I think, which is not a bad thing. That just it ends up being a slightly different approach.
Okay, now on her website, she does have listed what Kim Reaper Vampire Island is. So apparently these are spin-off stories from, I guess, her main Kim Reaper line.
Yeah, that would make sense.
Yeah. Okay, let's look at the last webcomic that we're going to be discussing. This is, I think, could be categorized as yet another horror comic. Mm-hmm. And this is Ryan Andrews's Nothing is Forgotten. And the best way of finding this is by going to Ryan's website, which is ryan-a.com. That's ryan-a.com. And from there, you can see a link to his various illustrations, his about page, his shop, his blog, contact information, so on and so forth. But if you click on comics, then you can see the various webcomics that he has created so far. And I want to talk about some of those others, the fact that they exist later. But let's get into the nitty-gritty of Nothing is Forgotten. I don't know when this was created because Andrews doesn't date his webcomics, which is fine. But I don't know how old this is. But it is a webcomic primarily in 6 pages of long strips that you have to scroll down in order to get the story. So in other words, this is something like we're used to seeing at Webtoons or even at Study Group, because they tend to privilege the long strip form where you have to scroll down to get the story. And I like that. I appreciate that. This is a story that is silent and
completely wordless.
Yes. And it is in gray tones, appropriately enough. So how would you describe what this story is about?
I think I find this one a little hard to summarize, despite not being terribly long. So we have, it starts off at a funeral.
Again, appropriately enough for, Halloween. It starts off at a funeral as a child and we learn eventually as a child and his mother are burying the father. We don't know what happened. We don't know why he's died, but he has passed. And the child in his grief ends up running out into the woods later that night and stumbles across some weird creatures. He stumbles across some weird trees. Creature singular.
Yeah. Yes.
That we know of. Yeah.
Yeah. He ends up getting, I'm not sure if it's necessarily a gift from them per se, or I'm not sure. He suddenly finds himself with an umbrella, which he needs because it starts raining. He is then found by his mother. They go back to the house. Everything seems fine. She was worried about him, obviously. But this umbrella acts as kind of a lodestone almost for these creatures, or this family of creatures that he seems to have found out in the woods. And there seems to be, again, this is wordless, so it doesn't, not made expressly clear, but they seem to be looking for that umbrella or trying to get the umbrella returned or get the owner of the umbrella to come with them or something to that effect. It's a little unclear there, but basically he ends up getting haunted in a matter of by these strange creatures.
Well, he may or may not, because these scenes that you were starting to describe take place while he's asleep. These could be his dream.
Yes.
Because
that is true.
At one point, and in fact, this may be on, I think it may be the 4th page of this webcomic, where he had gone to sleep previously, and then next if we go to this 4th page, we see him again with the umbrella, but this time he's standing over a grave, like he was at the very beginning of the story, his father's grave, and he's looking down, and those bright eyes of this creature are staring up at him, and 2 arms reach up, and then he wakes up in a terror. So we know that that's a dream. And then all of a sudden he looks outside, and that's when he sees, as you were describing it, this family of strange creatures. And these creatures are drawn relatively simply and ambiguously. They're large. They are, they look like big beans with arms and legs, dark beans with just eyes, from what we can tell. And they're roaming around his yard, and they have umbrellas. And so he reaches under his bed to get his umbrella, goes outside, chases after them, can't find them. But then at the top of page 5, we see he's back in bed. And so all of that could have been a dream. And he looks over in the corner and he sees that umbrella. And so we don't know exactly what went on.
Right.
If anything.
Yeah. See, and it's he doesn't go into a lot of, because it's wordless. There's, not a lot of exposition on this. Certainly a lot open to interpretation. I personally, given by how the story ends, and I don't really want to give that away here, but given how the story ends, my take on it is those are all things that actually did happen. And whether or not you want to define that as a dream or some kind of crossing over of worlds or something that actually physically happened, a lot of various explanations are certainly possible there. But like I said, given how the story ends, I personally think that something that was not just a dream. I think something actually did happen.
Yeah.
Again, whether or not there was some kind of crossing over to some kind of netherworld for a little bit, or if it was a dream, there was some kind of real interaction there or something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But I like that ambiguity, right? Is it a dream or is it not a dream? I think both possibilities are definitely there.
Yeah. Yeah, certainly as you're reading it.
Yeah. Now, one of the things you forgot to mention in the setup, and this is definitely linked to what we see at the very end. And again, I don't want to give anything away, but right before the young boy is rescued by his mother and some men in town, he comes out from hiding. The rain has stopped. He has his umbrella. And he goes back to this tree from which that one creature had emanated. And he looks a little closer and he sees what appears to be some steps that lead down somewhere. And he looks down and he sees this pair of these bright eyes in the dark looking back up at him. And it's at this point that the men of the town and his mother who have come looking for him discover him, and he forgets about all of this hole in the tree and what may be down there at the point, because, he's been lost. He's been through an adventure. He runs to his mother. He finds out later in the story that the men of the town who noticed the same hole in the tree, the ambiguous hole in the tree, they boarded up. Mm. And then this fact becomes a major point at the very end of the story on its 6th page.
Yeah.
Now, I don't think it's too much giving things away to state that the transition between page 5 and page 6, basically, he and his mother have to leave the house. Apparently, it was foreclosed on. And so the very last panel on page 5, the boy looks back and he sees the house by itself. Then we go to the next page, 6. And we see the house standing alone, very similar to what we saw at the end of page 5. But it's not the same time period. We see a man get out of a truck, I don't know if it's a truck or a car, I can't remember, and go toward the house, and he parks at the house. And this is the young boy, now a grown man. And so he has come back for something. Now, what that is, we don't want to give away.
Right. Yeah. And at first, he actually does kind of approach the house and, looks through the windows and whatever. And you get the sense that maybe it's just a nostalgia that he's come back and whatever. But then he goes on to do a few more actions. And this is the very last, half dozen panels or so of the story. And he goes back to basically resolve and bring the circle back, as it were, with the entire story.
Right.
But yeah, but you don't get that when he first comes back. You think maybe he's just coming back to, maybe he's bought the house back or just looking for a sense of nostalgia or what have you.
Right, exactly. And that's where I think the title becomes very significant, because at the very beginning, when I was reading this, I thought nothing is forgotten. Oh, it's about this funeral, right? His father's just passed. He and his mother are both grief-stricken. And so nothing is forgotten. It's his father.
Right.
But there's something else that's not forgotten. At the same time, I think that these two things, right, the death of the father and this mystery being, this, I don't know if we want to call it a monster, but this creature and this hole in the tree may possibly in some way be linked.
Sure.
Because as you pointed out, this creature seems to care for the young boy by giving him an umbrella in anticipation of a storm that's about to come.
Well,
he cares for him.
That's the interesting thing, though. That's not made explicit either. We're assuming that.
Right.
But we never actually.
Again, an ambiguity in this story.
A nice little ambiguity. Yeah, because we don't actually see the creature. I was just flipping through that sequence again just now. We don't actually see the creature hand him the umbrella or leave the umbrella. We see the creature kind of kind of looking at the child, just kind of right next to him. Mm-hmm. And then in the next panel, the creature's left and there's an umbrella sitting there. Mm-hmm. So we don't know if the creature has necessarily left the umbrella. The creature could have become the umbrella. The creature could have not have any relation to the umbrella and somebody else left the umbrella for him. There's a lot of interpretation up there, which I think is, again, to your point, is one of the very interesting things about this story is there's a lot left open to the reader to interpret however they want to.
Exactly.
Without being confusing. Mm-hmm. It's not just that the story, it's not like the story's done badly and the reader has to figure all this stuff out for themselves or anything. It's done very well, I thought. It's intentionally left open so you can impart your own interpretation on there. And I think that's very deliberate, and I think it's very successful in that regard.
Oh, this is a fabulous webcomic. And I have to say it's probably the highlight of this month's readings.
And I'll throw this out. It's also one of the older ones too. Not the oldest, because Zombie Hunters, like we talked about, was 2006. I actually just stumbled across, while we were talking here, there's a process blog that Ryan had posted in 2011 where he's specifically talking about how he was drawing this particular page. So it's late 2010, early 2011 looks to be about the time frame that this went up. Or at least when it was completed.
Yeah. Okay, that's good to know. So now this is one of several webcomics, relatively short webcomics, that you can find on Ryan Andrews' site under the comics link. Did you happen to go through, or did you already know any of these other webcomics?
I believe I've seen one or two of them before, but I did not go through them all recently.
Okay, so yeah, I was just so taken by Nothing Is Forgotten that I went and read all of those. I think everything except for the journal comics that he wrote. Now, The Tunnel is also a primarily wordless strip. And I think it's in just one page, but it's more humorous. It's almost gothic, but it's more humorous than anything. Mm-hmm. Another one of those stories, Our Bloodstained Roof, was actually nominated for an Eisner Award in 2013 under Best Digital Comic category. That's a worded comic, and so you do have people speaking. And that is a fabulous webcomic. I can see why it was nominated. I can't remember what won that year, but the great thing about this story is it's about this family who are living in a house, and then one day, for no reason they can decipher, geese that are flying over all of a sudden fall from the sky onto their roof, and in doing so, the blood spatters. And so the father and the three sons, and by the way, the narrator is the youngest of the three, go up to the roof. They take all the geese off. They put them in a bag. And the kids ask, are we going to bury them? And the father says, no, No way I'm going to have these diseased geese in my yard. I'm going to take them to the dump. And the kids are so grief-stricken, and, they also feel guilty. It's like, what about the birds and their souls? They're going to come back as zombies and haunt us. So they take the geese out and bury them in the forest right next to the property. And then after that, we learned that the father, doesn't let on that he knows what the boys did, even though he probably does. But as quote unquote punishment, he says that they have to go up to the roof and clean the blood off. And even after a rain, the blood doesn't come off. So the boys scrub. And in fact, the blooded roof, or the blood-stained roof, as the title suggests, becomes a point of punishment for the boys throughout their lives before they leave home. And so every time someone does something wrong, the father says, go up and do some scrubbing, but they can't get the blood out. And then years later, once, the narrator is an adult, the roof is still bloodstained. It's great. It's a great story. I can see why it was nominated. And then there's another story that Andrews wrote called Sara and the Seed, which is rather strange. It's about a man and woman who want to have a child, but they can't. Time passes. Eventually they get quite old. And then all of a sudden the old woman realizes she's pregnant, and she doesn't know, how can this be possible? She ends up giving birth to a seed, this big seed. And so what happens is the woman, or the mother of the seed, decides that she's going to take it outside and plant it. And it's what happens after she plants it. So the seed becomes her child, and then what grows from the seed becomes her child, or maybe children. But these are really great stories. But I was so taken with Nothing is Forgotten that I wanted to read the other things that Ryan Andrews had written. Yeah,
clearly, very talented storyteller. And does some very fantastic work. And I'll going back to Nothing is Forgotten specifically. The fact that it's done completely wordlessly is super impressive.
And it's to its strength too.
Yeah, it's to its strength. That's a hard, you'll see professional comic creators do that from time to time and try and do a wordless comic. And it's easy to see where that falls down sometimes. Even professional comic artists who have been doing this kind of thing for years and years and decades, they have difficulty with that sometimes. But Ryan seems to have no challenge with that. I don't know how much time he spent actually working on getting this exactly the way he wanted, but it looks seamless and very smooth, at least from the finished product.
Yeah, and people should definitely check this one out. And again, It is Ryan, RYAN-A.com. And while you're there, check out the other comics that he does, as well as some of his illustrations. Those are really breathtaking as well.
Yeah, very, very talented.
Wow, this has been our October Halloween episode. We looked at 3 horror titles of horror to various degrees. We started off with Jenny Romanchuk's The Zombie Hunters, and you can find that at thezombiehunter's, that's one word.com. And we hope that when you go there, you're able to bring up the pages.
Yeah.
After that, we looked at Kim Reaper by Sara Graley. That's at kimreapercomic.com. And then we wrapped up with a completed webcomic, Nothing is Forgotten by Ryan Andrews. And the best way of finding that is by going to Ryan's website, www.ryan-a.com.
I was really pleased with everything we read this month. And, like you said, all over the map in terms of approaches and designs and everything, but all really good stuff.
Definitely.
Very, very good collection of material this month.
Mm-hmm. And if you want to find great comic storytelling like we've just been discussing for the past hour or so, then check out the website of our sponsor, and that is Discount Comic Book Service. Go to dcbservice.com for all of their print stuff, but go to their sister company, mydigitalcomics.com, if you prefer your comics in digital form. That's dcbservice.com and mydigitalcomics.com. And after you do get your comics there, get in touch with us and let us know what you're going to be reading. If you go to our website, comicsalternative.com, you'll find that you can leave us a voice message online via SpeakPipe. Or you can call us the old-fashioned way by picking up your phone and dialing 4153-COMICS. That's 415-326-6427.
Or if you want to get in touch with us via email, we certainly have that as an option available. It's certainly easier if you want to suggest something we should take a look at and provide just a link to the website, the webcomics you want us to look at. You can email us at twoguys, TWOGUIS, at comicsalternative.com. Or you can email me directly at Sean, SEAN, at comicsalternative.com.
Or me at Derek at comicsalternative.com. Or you can reach us via social media. We're all over the place. We have accounts on Twitter, Facebook, Tumblr, Instagram, Google+, Goodreads, Pinterest, YouTube, Slack, and Discord. You can subscribe to the podcast through Apple Podcasts. You can stream us on Stitcher. You can also find us on Spotify, on Google Podcasts, on TuneIn, and on iHeartRadio. But you can find every single one of our podcast episodes, as well as the various reviews and comics-related commentary that we post on our blog, simply by going to our website, comicsalternative.com.
Lots of great material to talk about, and we like hearing from everybody. So by all means, let us know what you're interested in, what you like and what you don't like, and what we should take a look at.
Yeah.
Plenty of way. We try to make it as easy as possible to get a hold of us to do that.
We do. And we look forward to being back next month to talk about more great webcomics. Until then, I'm Derek.
And I'm Sean. And we'll see you next month.